Well, hi, everybody. I think it's the appointed hour. I'm Blake. I coach 4909 in Billerica. And I want to ask you, you want to hear something completely insane? This is an interactive presentation. The more you interact, the more fun it is. Woo! We built 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 robots in 8 weeks. And we did that in 4 meetings a week, and we went home on time, mostly. Mostly.
Was this a pre-planned presentation, or did somebody make all these graphics?
These are actual pictures of robots that you can't, like, if you zoom in, you can see, like, we built this robot. This robot was done at the end of week 1. Wow. This is not a robot you would take to a competition. It's got a fun noodle on it. But it was enough that we could give it to the software team and be like, hey guys, go make this thing drive cool swerve paths. Like, it had the Kitbot shooter on it. Hey, what do you got?
2 questions.
Shoot.
How long are your meetings?
So we meet Mondays and Tuesdays, 5:30 to 9, and then Fridays is 2:30 to 9, and Saturdays is like 9 to noon, and that's it.
Also, so did you use the same parts for each robot, or did you have
So this robot became that one, and this robot became that one, and that robot became this one. So there was always kind of 2 robots, but never did these 5 exist at the same time. That would have been cool, but that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 swerve chassis. Yeah, sorry, I don't have that kind of money. Okay, so me expressing this fact is going to create envy in some, anger in others, skepticism in most, confusion in old people, and inspire a select few. And the select few is who I made this presentation for. So this was our best season yet. We built 5 robots. We've tried to build more than 1 robot in the past and never succeeded. There were some things that are different. We're going to talk about that. Software had the robot after week 1. That was a game changer for us. This was one of our best records. I'm so proud of these kids. They put in so much work and completely changed the way the team works. It was fantastic. So you might have heard of Agile. Some of the adults might have done this at work. Some people are trying to do it, and they're probably doing it wrong. So I want to talk about that. There's 3 things we're going to talk about today. Work in process is a silent killer, high velocity decision making, and successfully herding cats. And you might be thinking, this doesn't make any sense. Don't worry about it. We're going to talk about all 3 of these things. So said simply, who wants to inspire a lot of students? That's our goal as a team, is to inspire. We're not in education, like that's school, that's college. We're here to inspire and make it exciting and interesting and want to learn more. Okay, so work in process is a silent killer. Who believes that you have to work hard to win? Who believes that staying late makes you more productive? Oh, I got 1. Okay, 2. Who believes that no one can outwork them? Nobody? Okay. What's wrong with this picture? What do you got? Shoot them out. What? There is stuff everywhere. This guy's checking his credit score. There's trash on the table. These guys don't have safety glasses on. And there's trash all over this table. How do you build a robot with trash everywhere? What do you got?
Well, I was going to say something wrong, but that guy's using the backup.
Yep. What's even funnier is him and I presented this presentation at the mentor conference, and he was standing up here next to him, and I got to totally roast him. It's fantastic. Okay, so how do we solve this problem? We identified a whole bunch of them. We started every other meeting celebrating the success. What did we achieve in the last 2 meetings? What are the goals we had? What was the plan we had? What did we miss? Why did we miss those goals? And what are we going to do so we don't miss goals like that again in the future? And then we spent a bunch of time, tried to cap it at half an hour, building a plan for the next 2 meetings. So like I said, we had 4 meetings a week, 2 meeting sprints. So 2 meetings were planned together, 2 meetings were planned together. So Monday and Tuesday were planned together, Friday and Saturday were planned together. We're going to dive deeper into this building a plan, so I'm going to hand wave a little bit. And then the last bit is we celebrated our success, we built the plan, and then we did 15 minutes of cleanup. Everybody leaves at different times, so stuff just kind of gets left everywhere. So we start at the beginning. Everyone's here for the meeting. They want to be involved in the decision-making process. They got to help clean up. Sort, sweep, standardize. If you come from Lean, like they talk about 5S. I can't remember all the 5 S's, so we just talk about the 3 that are really important. Sort, sweep, and standardize. So when we talked about building that plan, how do you pick what you're going to do? There's all these amazing things we could do. We prioritize based on value, and the value is, how does the robot help me score points? The next thing is risk. How risky is that thing that we're going to do? And this one's really hard. We won't talk too much about this, but it's a nice tiebreaker for if there's 2 things that you can do, and what happens if I don't do that one right now? If I can push that off till later, maybe it's okay to push it off. If it's a week before your competition and you don't have bumpers, probably need to start building your bumpers. The other thing that took a little bit to explain and understand is priority is for resource contention only. When we're talking about prioritizing, we're going to prioritize just the top 3 things. But that doesn't mean we're not going to do all the other things. It just means that if somebody needs the 7/16 wrench and we can only find one of them, the priority number 1 is going to get that wrench. And then if they don't need it, priority 2 gets it. Or if the software mentor is needed in 2 different groups, they're going to go to the number 1 priority, then the number 2. That's what the prioritization is all about. So figuring out, that's the question. What should we do next? So here's our case study. Imagine, put yourself in the shoes of this scenario. It's week 1 of the build season. You got 25 team members. You got 8 student leads and 5 mentors. And we set a goal as a team. This was our goal last year. One of them was, let's have drive practice every weekend. The way you get good, like you can build the best robot in the world, but if the kid has never driven it before, it sucks. So it has to be, let's drive practice. So that was a goal the team put together. So in this case study, let's look at, here's all the things we could do. We could do some tests on wheel tread, like 88 was doing. We could build field elements. We could make our CNC process better. This is just a short list, but at the beginning of every meeting, we build this list on the whiteboard. It's just like this, and I'd say, okay, what are all the things we need to do? And let's write them down. And we started with me doing it, and then our team captain took over. Eventually, we're going to get to the point where all of the student leads are going to rotate through that job. Like, let's capture all of the things we need to do and then come up with the top 3. So I want to give you an example. Let's talk through prioritizing based on points. How many points can the work help us score? Which one of these helps us score the most points? How many hands we got for wheel tread tests? We got to have the best wheels. No takers, darn it. How about a shooter? Can't score points without a shooter. Okay, I got a couple, 3. How about drivetrain? Okay, we got some smart people in here. So I'm going to argue that you need a drivetrain. If you build the best shooter in the world and it scores every single time, without a drivetrain, you're hosed. You got to build a drivetrain first. This has to be the number 1 priority, right? I want to just talk a little bit about risk. Which one of these is going to help us reduce our risk early? Have we ever built this shooter before? I don't know about you, but I haven't shot a note before at the beginning of the season. I also have not used any of the wacky treads that 88 used. So which one of these is going to help us reduce the most risk? Wheel tread tests? Man, no takers again. How about the shooter? Any takers for the shooter? Oh, I got a couple on the shooter. How about the drivetrain? Okay, good. I agree. I think it's the shooter. If we can't figure out how to shoot the note, we got to rethink our entire strategy here. This example might be hard to understand, but I'll give you another one for cost of delay. Let's say you're a company that makes lights that you can string up outside, and it takes you 3 months to develop a new product, and you're going to say, I want to develop a new Christmas light. I could develop a new Christmas lighting system, or I could develop a new patio lighting system. It's 6 months away. It's 5 months away from Christmas time. That's your biggest season to sell Christmas lights. If I develop the patio light first, it's going to take me 3 months to develop that, and then 3 months to develop the Christmas lights, and they're going to be available in January. How many Christmas lights are we going to sell in January? Not a whole lot. So which one should we do first? There you go. We should do the Christmas lights first in that example. Okay, so what happens if we don't do the work now? Are there any of these things that we can not push off? And he asked that in the positive. Which one of these things that we can't wait on? What do you got? Drivetrain. Well, we got the drivetrain, we got the shooter. I should have changed those out. This is a trick question. Bumper. Yeah. If we wait on the bumpers and the drivers get really good at driving a robot without bumpers and you put bumpers on and they're like, man, this thing doesn't line up the same anymore. Bumpers was our third priority. And they don't have to be perfect bumpers. They just got to be representative. So to sum that all up, work in process is a silent killer. Incomplete work delivers no value. If you have a robot if you have a shooter with no drivetrain, it delivers you no points. You can't score any points with it. Okay, so the next one, high velocity decision making. Who thinks this sounds right? You must take time to make sure you're making the decision, the right decision. The more upfront thinking leads to better decisions. I got a couple, okay. Everyone must agree before finalizing the decision. So to me, this sounds like the Jedi Council. It takes them forever to make a decision. So we changed that and we said we need to be like the guy who's inspecting produce. Like there is no time to wait. Just make the decision quick and move forward and find out if you're wrong. So here's some tools we used to do that. We got to understand one-way versus two-way doors. We got to make the decisions clear to the entire team, and we got to assume that our beliefs are wrong and prove them right or wrong. So let's dive into those. We'll start with this reversible decisions. This is a concept that came out, I think it came from Amazon. That's where I've heard it from the most, is if you have a door and you're in a theater and it says exit only, no readmittance, you can't get back in. It's the same concept for you're doing work and maybe you're going to modify the only swerve drivetrain you have and you don't have any more material. Is that a reversible decision or a not reversible decision? I would argue that's a not a reversible decision because it costs you time and money. You got to go buy more stuff. So we got to think about that decision a little bit more. That's a one-way door. A two-way door might be, I got 5 of these gears. I want to try cutting a couple of teeth off to see if I can make the chain not skip. Okay, great. We got 5 of them. We're not planning to use them. Go ahead, try it. That's a two-way door. If it doesn't work, no big deal. So we use this terminology to talk about when we're making decisions. Is it a one-way door or is it a two-way door? We just kind of level set on using that and saying, oh, it's a two-way door. Go ahead and try it. Oh, it's a one-way door. Let's think about it a little bit more. Maybe there's something else we want to try first. If you've heard of RACI and RAPID, this was our follow-through. Making the decisions that get made very clear to everybody was kind of a source of suffering the previous year. So we went looking, like, what are the decision-making models people use in industry? You might have heard of RACI, you might have heard of RAPID. We looked at this as a group of mentors and said, that's pretty neat. We like the idea of recommenders. We like the idea of people giving input, and we like the idea of having one person who makes the final decision. So we just kind of modified it, and it has to be the bionic, the bird model. It's got to be a fun backronym, right?
That should probably stand for the record.
There you go, sure. So we simplified it down and said, for any decision we're going to make, we're going to have one decider, we can have a few recommenders, and a bunch of people we're going to get input from. And we just kind of normalized this process of the students last year said, and we're going through it now. Hey, we want to decide what events we're going to compete at this year. How do we make that decision? Well, at the end of the day, someone's got to make the decision. But we need to get some input. So, and get some recommendations. So we set this up and said, me as the mentor will be the final decision maker. I will take recommendations from the team captain, and the team captain is going to collect input from the entire team. The reason we did this is, at the end of the day, you can only have one person making a decision. If you try and have 2 people doing it, they have to agree, and getting people to agree is, like you said, a hard problem. So having some kind of model like this that you use with your teams, I find really valuable. This helped us go a lot faster. All right, who's built something that didn't work the first time? Only half the room? Everybody else is lying, or they're perfect. Anything. All right, there we go. So the reason I asked that is, until the drive team can consistently score points with something, it doesn't work. We just set that definition and said, oh, you can have an awesome shooter, and if it doesn't if it doesn't work on the drivetrain, it doesn't work. And if if the drive team can't use it, it doesn't work. So what that means is that the drive practice got really important. Every Saturday was if the drive team can use it to score points. So that means they need to learn what the buttons are. They need to learn all of the ins and outs of that feature. And this also goes to that assume what you think isn't right. If you just say, oh, I built a shooter, I can put it on the floor here and it shoots the node in every time, it's going to work. Okay, but prove to me that it works by putting on a drivetrain and let's do it. So we don't call anything done until it's been used by the drive team in a drive practice and they've given us feedback. So to wrap that all up, high velocity decision making is we set clarity on how decisions were made and we didn't waste time on non-valuable decisions. Any decisions that's a two-way door, just pick something and go. Because if you spend 2 hours talking about it, that's just time lost. Okay, the third thing I want to talk about is successfully herding cats. I really enjoy this AI generated image. I hope you guys get as much comedy out of it as I do. Like, I don't know where this cat went, but it's gone. And this one's got 2 leashes that kind of, anyway. The reason I asked AI to generate this image for me was imagine what happens if we make a very loud noise in the middle. Bad things, right? They all scatter and choke each other. In my mind, this is the mental model of the high school kids. You let them loose in the shop and they just kind of go. So how do we as mentors build a little bit of guide rails to say, let's all move in the same direction? So one of the things we did this year was talking about the 8 ways of lean. And you can go find this online, but the one that we talked about first was unused genius. And I can't tell you how much difference this made. Like, we came into the meeting and I said, hey, there's this thing, it's called lean, and we talked about it, and we talked about unused genius. Anytime someone's at a meeting and they aren't contributing to delivering value to the team, that we're not using that person's genius. It's not that they're being lazy. It's not that they're doing anything wrong. It's that we're not figuring out how to bring them in and help them contribute to the team. And just having this conversation with the team, we saw a complete turnaround from there was always like 5 or 10 kids sitting in the corner doing nothing to, hey, I saw this thing on the board. I don't know how to do this. Can you help me do it? It's fantastic. So part of that is teaching the team to see these wastes. If you overproduce, you make too many parts that are wrong, you bring the wrong thing to competition, you buy too many of the wrong thing, like I said, you make something that's wrong. You're moving back and forth when you're trying to make something. Teaching the team about these wastes and helping them and empowering them to eliminate them was another kind of tenet of our plan this year. And the other piece was this clear communication. Limiting surprises. We found that if you surprise people with a decision that got made, there's a lot more resistance than, hey, we're going to make this decision, we're going to collect input, here's the input that was collected, here's the recommendation, here's the decision, and why. The why is the important piece. Everybody says this, set achievable goals. We're going to talk a little bit more about how we kind of came up with what those were. And then reiterating the work. I think this was the biggest piece for us. At every other meeting, it was, here's the list of things we need to do to compete this year, and here's the top 3, but all these other ones need to get done. Seeing that on the whiteboard and going through that exercise over and over and over again, people are like, man, I don't want to talk about the bumpers anymore. Can I just build those, please? Like, yes, right over there, there's the stuff, let's do it. So said simply, the fastest teams are all moving in the same direction. I think this is truly, I can't say this enough. Like, the best teams in the world have a whole bunch of students that are all working with the mentors and moving and working on the same thing. Figuring out how to do that is the real trick. Okay, so there's the 3 things in summary. Work in process is a silent killer. If you do work and it delivers no value, the incomplete work delivers no value. High velocity decision making, don't waste time on non-valuable decisions. And successfully herding cats. Like I said, the fastest teams are all moving in the same direction. Okay, so what's the hardest part? That's all easy, right? Just do it. What's the hardest part? Wait, but why? Why is it hard? People. You got it. People. Getting people to do that. The what and the how. Okay, so here's our journey. This is all at the beginning was what we did. Here's how we got there. We started with the mentors. This has to be a pull, not a push. You have to be walking, if you're a mentor, sorry students, this was conceived for the mentor conference. So if you're a mentor, you got to start and walk the path. And then you got to haul your team captains and your student leads along with you and bring them onto the path. And then you need them to help you bring the whole team onto the path. Who's in team leadership? A student lead. Yeah, so all of you guys are involved. And so you need to make sure that they're pulling you along. Okay, so we started with the mentors. What did that look like? This was, 2022 was kind of a rough year for us. We had a lot of mentors and a lot of differing opinions. So we had a barbecue at my house. I said, okay, come over, I'm gonna feed you, and we're gonna talk about how we make this team better. Let's find some common ground on some broken things. And my buddy Lewis totally threw me under the bus. He's like, man, you handled this situation very poorly. As the team lead, you need to do better. Here's a way I think it could have been better. And it started the conversation. I was totally not ready. It was fantastic. But that opened up all the other mentors to being like, okay, he's taking heat. I'm willing to take some heat. We're gonna dish it out and have this conversation in a blameless way. Like, what are the things that didn't work? For us, it was, we had a bunch of groups of mentors. They all worked in different rooms, and we had a whole bunch of different ideas. And we come back together not often enough. So then we talked about, I had done some research. Lewis brought some ideas. Some of these lean tools we talked about. How do we apply those to help us solve these problems? So we took this, this case study of, hey, we disagreed and we were working in different rooms, to we need to have more frequent check-ins. How do we make sure we do that? What is the process that we're going to use? And that became, we're going to check in every 2 meetings. Because if we get too much further than 2 meetings, we diverge, and then it's hard to get back together and be moving in the same direction. There was a lot of what ifs. Oh my God. What if this? What if that? I don't know how this is going to work. What if this doesn't work? Okay, I don't know. I don't know all the answers. Let's try it and find out. And if it doesn't work, let's just time box it. We're going to try it for a week. If it doesn't work, we'll get back together and dream up a new thing. A lot of the things worked. A few of them we iterated on. That was a big takeaway from this meeting that's not a bullet point on this slide, is we really have to think about the process of building the team, building the robot, as a process that's iterative. The robot changes, and so does the process. You can't just say, here's this rock solid process. We're going to kick off this and that and the other thing. It doesn't work like that. Like, things change, people's opinions change, lives change. All of the things are changing. You just have to change with it. The next piece, okay, we got the mentors. We got them kind of in the same headspace. Let's bring the student leads along. So in our preseason, we shared the learnings, and I wrote up like a 3-page document that said, here's a few things we think we should try. Gave that out to the student leads and said, what do you guys think? Let's talk about these things, how we think they fix the problems. Excuse me. And we started with sprints and said, let's try 1-week sprints on our preseason. We only meet once up until kickoff, once a week, and try and do something and say, let's set a goal and then see how we did. And we did that for a while. We tried putting things on a Trello board and did that for a couple of weeks, and people didn't really buy into it. And we tried doing stand-ups, said, tell us what you did, tell us what you're going to do. That was pretty painful too. And we did that for 4 or 5 weeks in the preseason. And then the team captain's like, why are we doing this? Like, because I want you to ask that question. This process clearly isn't working. So what should we do instead? And I asked them, like, I don't know what we should do. It's not working. Let's talk about it. And we did that idea set that, oh, hey, look, we can actually change the process we're using. It doesn't have to be dictated to us. And then, of course, there's a whole bunch of what ifs. Hey, I don't know if it's going to work. We get a whole bunch of people. I can't read all their minds. Let's try it. Let's time box it. We'll try it for a couple of meetings and see how it works. So we did that for the preseason. And then at kickoff, the week before kickoff, we said, hey, we've been trying this new thing with the student leads. We finally got it to a point where we think we like it. Let's try doing 2 meeting sprints. We're going to meet 4 times a week. We're going to use this prioritization. And the first one we said, we're just going to talk about points. We didn't talk about the other ones. Those are kind of a little more complex. And then we said, hey, if we're not sure, we're going to try it. We're going to find out. And this is the theme for the entire season. What if? We can't answer all the what ifs ahead of time. I know NASA tries to, but even they forget unit conversion and crash things into Mars, so it happens. The answer is try more things. So from all of this work we did, there was a whole bunch of pitfalls, a whole bunch of things we learned that I want to caution you about. The first one was a super sprint. After the first week, everyone put a whole bunch of work in and built that Kitbot robot. It was like, oh man, this is so cool, we have a robot. But there's no way we could build a competition robot in 2 meetings. There's no way we can do it. Like, okay, so what do you want to do? Like, let's try 3 weeks, like a week and a half, 3 meetings, or 3 groups, 3 sprints of meetings, and see how it goes. And we didn't really check in that time, and the same battle thing happened. Like the shooter team went over here, and the drive team went up there, and then we get to the end, and it's like, man, these things don't fit together. Like, what happened? So caution the idea of super sprints. Do the check-in every interval you set it at. If you set it a week, great. If you set it every meeting, great. You have to check in and say, where are we at? What did we achieve? What did we miss? The things that you miss on, like, we're not trying to assign blame, we're just trying to understand why we missed on them. You know, if we set a goal to build bumpers and we didn't build bumpers, well, how come we didn't build bumpers? Well, you didn't order the fabric. I'm like, I didn't know I was supposed to order the fabric. Like, well, how would I know? Like, oh, so all these things get exposed as what are the problems in our process that let things fall on the floor. And as the season went, we got better and better. Probably one of my favorite quotes of all time is from Einstein. And he defined insanity. Anyone know this? What's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. So that was another thing we did a couple of times in the preseason, and I'm going to claim that I use it as a teaching tool and said, hey guys, like, this process clearly isn't working. You realize that, so what are we going to do to change it? You have the power to change it. The doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results is not the solution. The thing we did the first 2 sprints was, man, we just made this giant list. Look at this list. Oh my God. Let's prioritize it. Everything. Let's go down to the top 10. 2 hours in, we got through the first 4. It's like, oh, okay. One of the mentors shouts out, like, why don't we just try those 4? See if we can hit them. So pick a number. We picked 3. We thought that worked really good. The top 3 things that you're going to achieve in the next interval of time. And for us, it was 2 meetings. This was kind of a carryover from 2022. Anytime you surprise someone with a decision, man, it doesn't work. So make the decision that you're going to make very clear, why it was made, and what input people, and the time frame that they have to give input. So we have a Slack channel that people can say, like, I'm proposing we make this decision about what events we go to. I'd like recommendations from this person. I'd like input from these groups on Slack. And I'm going to make a decision by this date because I got to put it in first. That kind of thing. We learned that stand-ups in the conventional sense from Scrum didn't really work for us. Trying to get everyone to say, like, here's what I did, here's what I'm going to do, just became a status. And it wasn't interactive, collaborative, like, how are we as a team going to achieve this list of things? So I talked a little bit about how we use Slack. One of the other things we did was, after every one of our prioritization meetings, we would say, like, here we go, sprint sprint 3, which was those dates. There was our priorities. And I didn't blow them out there, but every time we had a sprint planning meeting, it went into Slack, and we had a single channel called Sprint Planning that has all the history. And some of these, I think it was the next sprint, was the first one that we achieved all 3 sprint goals. The number of emojis on the message saying we achieved all the sprint goals was like every student pushed every emoji. It was very exciting. So I don't want to tell you that we're done. We have Lean as a journey, not a destination. So there's a YouTube video I want to point you at. There's a link on the next slide. I'll put all these slides, or I'll give them to the team here, and they'll get them out to you. This video is really good about that morning meeting, or we called it our stand-up or our sprint planning meeting, how some companies in industry run those. I really enjoy that video. He talks about rotating the meeting host, educating the teams on lean, and also like pick something unique, interesting fact and share it with the group. So whether that's one of the guys does like Constitution amendments, like what are all the amendments to the Constitution, and they just go through those, and someone has to come in and be ready to talk about them. Icebreakers for retention, we were talking about that at the beginning. I think our retention this past year wasn't great. We had like 30 new students sign up, and I think we kept about 11 of them. So I'd like to see that number be higher. We were talking about at the beginning here that bringing in a block of ice and pounding with hammers is a lot of fun, and that kind of cements a happy memory of, hey, we get to do crazy fun things on the robotics team. I'm gonna have to steal the one that's the spaghetti and marshmallow tower. I think that's fantastic. There's still more about this learning to see waste. You saw the pile of stuff on the table, like, man, it's really hard to build a shooter when there's all kinds of trash in front of you. And then empowering everyone to make and share improvements. This is another thing that some of the guys I'll talk about here, they talk a lot about empowering their employees to just improve things. Like, oh man, the drill bits drawer is a mess. Like, why don't you go to printables and print a thing that goes in the drawer that organizes drill bits? Empowering the students and the team to do those kind of things. So Paul Akers, he wrote a book, it's really good, called 2 Second Lean. Highly recommended if you haven't read that. But the concept, like the key takeaway from that book is ask all of your teammates, your employees, to do a 2-second improvement every day. Do something that improves whatever you're doing, your life, your process, your machining, your manufacturing by 2 seconds. Set the bar so low that everyone can achieve it, and sometimes you'll get 5, 10, 15, 20, an hour worth of value back from those improvements. Paul's a huge inspiration for me. Paul inspired this guy, Ryan Tierney. He runs a company called Seating Matters. They make seating for handicapped and disabled folks in Northern Ireland. And he talks a lot about how he runs his morning meetings and how he rotates that meeting host to get everyone used to public speaking and talking about what they've learned and sharing improvements. Really great video. This is a link, so feel free to click that when you find these slides. And Tom Hughes talks a lot about documentation. We were talking about that in the last presentation, about how do you get people to write things down and find that standard work. I haven't done this with my team, but we have a little knowledge base, but it's mostly written by mentors at this point, like how do you do CAM and how do you 3D print? But Tom's got a really interesting tool that runs on your smartphone, and you can like take pictures and write a little blurb, and it's very visual. So hopefully that's something I'm going to dive into this year. All right, questions? Shoot.
Go back to the cat one.
There it is. And they're all wearing they even got a 4909 shirt on. Look at that. What do you got?
Do you make this?
I asked Midjourney to make this. Yes.
Kind of like what a robot might look like if you don't plan it.
True. Yeah. Shoot. Go ahead, Brad.
That are recorded in different ways, and let's say are there any questions you ask yourself, like how you prioritize them, which one to pick?
Yeah, so if you got two things that seem like they have an equal point value, for example, okay, is one of them more risk? Like, let's say we have two concepts for a shooter. We've built a 2-wheel shooter before, but we've never built a catapult shooter. Well, if it's early in the season, there's time and space to build that catapult shooter and try it. So we kind of took the approach that early in the season, we can take more risk. Later in the season, we need to try the tried and true things and kind of dive into them. If two things have the same point value and same priority, then we use the cost of delay as the tiebreaker. If I have two things the 2 shooters, like what happens if I don't have a shooter this weekend? Well, I can't practice with it. So which one of these options is going to get me to a shooter fastest, kind of thing. And it's not always going to be black and white. But at the end of the day, someone's just going to be like, okay, we've talked about this for 5 minutes. I'm making the decision. We're going to build this type of shooter. And here's why I think we should make that decision, kind of thing, and move on. And worst case, you check in 2 days later and be like, okay, we made this decision. Do we still think it's the right path? Are we still building the right shooter? Should we continue down this path or should we scrap it, try something else? That's why we check in so frequently, is because you can't, we found that you can't say, I know exactly the robot I'm going to build in 6 weeks. I'm just going to design it now and then build it. It's iterative and it changes as you learn, and as RI3D comes out, as people post in Open Alliance, everything changes, right? Go ahead, Brad.
How do you help teach students to decide between what's I forget the phrase used, it's very good, like an important decision and a low importance decision, where
The one-way versus two-way doors idea?
yeah, it was related to that, but I think there was a note on but yeah, how do you get students to see the scope on whether something's going to be a one-way or a two-way? We see students will constantly ask us if this very, very low priority thing is going to be like life or death. And we're like, man, you waited in this line of 10 kids because there's 2 of us and 30 kids in this lab to ask me that question. Like, if you can open the window, like, yes, of course, it's open the window.
Yeah.
How to get kids to realize the scope of their question and be self-enacting to do it themselves. I actually struggle that with my team at work, adults too. So this is not a kid-specific question.
I guess the best thing I would say is I would use the term empower and bias for action coming out of the Amazon literature and say, like, hey, if you go make a decision and you have a reason for why you made it and it turns out to be wrong, like, I'm going to disagree with you and say, here's why I think it was wrong, but I empower you to make that decision, and I'm proud that you went ahead and tried something. So I think it's all about the messaging of how you give the feedback about, this was a good decision, thank you for making it, and empowering them to say, like, yes, go ahead and make that decision. Does that help a little bit?
That helps for my adults.
I feel like that works for the student leads and for the new kids that are coming on the team. Like that kind of, the open the window question, I'd be like, you can always open the window, and feel free to ask any of the student leads because they can delegate that type of question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do see a lot of, and I don't know if this was specifically a post-pandemic item, where kids were terrified to make any decision at all without strict, direct guidance and hand-holding to the destination.
Right.
And it's a lot harder to enact that in a 14-year-old than my 40-year-old coworkers. But they're going to be prepared when you tell them, like, yep, you can make a decision. That is like meltdown state.
Wow.
To having to make a decision.
Yeah, just like some of it, I think, without getting too much into it, the way like our school's grading policy and deadlines, there's a lot of fluidity, which has now been tightened back up. So the kids were like, well, I always have extra time, because we had kids last year on the team for the first time, and they're like, so what happens if our robot's not ready for inspection? And I'm like, oh, but then we don't compete, they don't give you extra time. I'm like, that's not how we had a couple of which was kind of like, it was a big change, probably from too many marshmallows in hospital.
Yeah, we got John.
So, you mentioned you have about 18 kids on your team. And so when you do your stand-up every 2 days, does like everybody talk at the stand-up? And how would that scale if you manage to retain all 30 freshmen?
Yeah, so I don't have your problem. So John's right. We're probably closer to 18, maybe 25 at some times. And it's like, okay, everybody, let's talk about all the things that we did in the last 2 days that were successful. and just like shout them out. We write them up on the board, and it's kind of like it's a classroom. Like everybody's sitting out here, and hey, like what did you do in the last 2 days? Like let's just write them down, and people shout out ideas. They get on the board. Like okay, great. What are the things that we tried to do? Here's our goals that we didn't achieve. Okay, we achieved this one. Great. We achieved this one. Great. Oh, we didn't hit this one. How come we didn't hit this one? Can we talk about that? Like who was working on that? What happened? Can you tell me about the shooter? Like why isn't the shooter working? And just kind of like have this open dialogue. And we try and limit this to like a 30-minute meeting. So we're not getting into super depth, but everybody has a little bit of situational awareness. And then we do okay, what are all the things that are left to do? And let's prioritize them. How that scales to 50.
It's not scalable.
Yeah, right. So we don't go around the room. It's kind of like a shout it out and let's get it on the board kind of thing. Yeah.
Sorry, I actually had the same comment as John because I have the same problem.
You have the same problem. I don't have that problem yet. I haven't figured it out. When you do, let me know.
But we have recently tried something at work which worked way better than I had expected it to. I work in a pretty small company, but we have 12 mechanical engineers, and brainstorming meetings are all of them. And you can imagine that could be a problem. We've recently switched to putting up categories on the board and then writing up our ideas or brainstorms on Post-it notes.
Oh, cool.
And then everybody's Post-it note goes up at the same time, and the meeting leader can sort them and then address them as clusters of suggestions. So you don't have to listen to the same thing 14 times, because well, we're only 12 engineers, 12 times, because everybody has the same.
That's a cool idea. Yeah. So we could totally do a process like that. Yeah.
That's makes the
Yeah.
shout it out scalable.
Yep. Nice. Other questions?
So this is kind of with how many robots you built last year. Because last year we built 2 robots for the first time ever, out of necessity, because our first robot ended up being horrendous by the time we finished UI. We couldn't even get out built through it. So the kids were really like, it took us 14 days for the second one, but we had like serious time constraints. This robot had to be ready for TCMP. When you guys like start that first one, do you have a plan for them? Like, all right, we're gonna do the kit bot. Do you have like sub teams do it, or how do you kind of approach that? Because it's something we've talked about. We have to get our kids hands-on, not afraid to just build robots right off the bat, because they tend to overanalyze sometimes. But so when you did that, did you just say, we're going to build just the kit bot? Did you give them a time frame?
So this was mostly new students and me, and I said, hey, we got this kit bot thing. Can we put this on that chassis? And a few new kids were like, oh, that sounds kind of interesting. Like, here's the documentation. Let's see if we can build the kit bot and then throw it on a chassis. And it was like there's some plywood and some nails and screws, and it was not something you take to a competition. But it was let's get hands-on for the new team members and give something the software that has the drivetrain. So that was a week. About a week and a half later, this was the first robot that had been put into CAD, and it had a fixed shooter and an intake. So this was the concept for that robot was, let's prove that we can get a note off the floor and then into the shooter. Like we had seen that you can, with this one, you can go over to the human player station and catch, right? So it's like, okay, we need to be able to prove we can pick it up off the floor. So that was kind of the design team took that challenge and said, okay, let's go figure out an intake. Let's figure out a shooter. And then there was like this concept of let's build a double jointed arm that can take that shooter and put it up and score into the amp. So that was kind of what this one was to prove out, was can we now take that shooter that we used to get it out of the intake, get it into the shooter, and then use the arm and put it in the amp. So that was kind of the progression, was I could take this to a competition and we could compete. It isn't a great robot. It was put together in a week and a half, like 2 days of CAD and like 4 days of make some parts and put it together. This robot was, okay, now we've learned everything. We've learned a lot. Let's fix some of the things we didn't know when we built that. Like we had a bunch of plates made out of Lexan holding bearings that, and like motors, and when the chain would tension, the plate would bend and then it would get loose. There was a lot of backlash. So this was like, let's build some aluminum plates, and basically the same design, but we changed some materials and changed some distances, like minor changes. And like this one was the one we competed with for most of the season. And then we took this one to district champs because by the end of our first three events, like we competed week 1, week 2, week 3. By the end of URI, this robot was trash. It was beat up. And it was like, okay, let's take everything we learned from driving this one, make very few changes, and turn this robot into that one. Like replace the broken plates, but it wasn't a complete redesign, rebuild kind of thing. Other questions? Yeah.
The mentors leave a lot of decision making to the student leaders. How would you recommend they take that process with their non-student leaders? How would you lead the rest of the team?
So the way we ran it was my team captain would say, hey, I want to make this decision. I propose that team captain is the person who's going to make the decision. I propose I'm going to collect recommendations from subsystem leads, and I propose inputs are going to be collected from the entire team. And that message would get posted into Slack. I'd say, yep, you have the decision-making authority, go ahead. So having that method and that structure to delegate from me as the decision maker to the team captain also works from the team captain down. So anyone on the student leads could say, hey, I think we need to make this decision. Here's my proposed structure for how we're going to collect recommendations and input. And I'd say, yeah, sure, go ahead, make the decision. I don't care what the answer is. If I did care, I'd say, I'm gonna retain the decision making. I'd like to hear your recommendation, and please go collect the input. Does that make sense? Other questions? Shoot.
But what was the acronym you had for your wastes? And
Oh man,
I'm so used to seeing Tim Woods, and you had a different one. I was curious. Not rapid, but wastes.
So I don't know as I have an acronym for the wastes. Let me pull that slide back up. Oh, you mean like these particular terms?
Yeah.
Yeah, I stole these from Paul Akers.
Okay.
It's his spin on the 8 ways to lean. This is the same. These are the same as all of the other ones with just different words. I tried to make it so it was like we have these. I have a set of posters I put up on the wall. That's what is overproduction and an example of, hey, if you make 5 shooters and we only have 1 robot, and all 5 shooters are the same, you overproduced. Like, so I try to give like relatable robot examples for these. This is what you're asking about, right?
Yeah. That answers my question. They got it from Paul Akers.
Yeah.
I just hadn't heard of these. There's one other one besides Tim Woods, but those are the 2 that I feel like you hear thrown around.
Yeah. Yep. Cool. Other questions? Thanks, everybody. This was great.
Thank you.